looking at a invasive species called the Nile perch, which is introduced into Lake Victoria. And so the kids start looking at the implications of what happens. The second lesson they start an invasive species project. Then they go out, they look at some data transects and see how scientists collect information. Then they're actually able to go out, whether you're doing it virtual or face-to-face, they would go out in their yard and do a data transect to collect some information. Then they would look at suitable habitats. What are habitat requirements for an organism in an ecosystem? And then they start to look at zebra mussels and look at a population and kind of start to see that there's value with long-term data, being able to predict what's going to happen. And then they get their owl pellets and they start to try to build a basic food web after they explore some of the biotic components in an owl's ecosystem. Then they do a reading on eating for energy and matter. So they really start to look at matter and energy and what's happening in an ecosystem with that. And then they explore paramecium with biotic factors and population growth. So they get to explore that. And then they do, they look at some interactions in ecosystems where they're looking at graphs and charts, and they start looking at helpful, harmful, some symbiotic relationships. And then they look at nematodes, decomposers, and the cycling of matter and how does matter get reintroduced into ecosystems. And then this activity that we're going to do right now is what is number 12. So that's what the kids already have as a background. So that puts that into context. Anytime you have any questions, let's just keep this totally laid back. Just interrupt me, ask me questions. That would be great. In a second, I'm going to share my screen after you're done with the poll.
And Sin, for some reason, it's not letting me. Does everybody see the poll?
I see it.
Great. If you could go ahead and vote whenever you get a chance. And then Cindy, for some reason, it's not letting me drop a file in there. So, you know, we can still roll with just the sim if I can't get the student book pages in there, and then I can get them to them later.
Okay.
I'm trying.
All right.
I did this thing one other thing.
So great. So it's really looking like how many, just a silly question. If you raise your hands, how many of you are remote? Okay. How many? Hi, all of you. Wow. Wow. So this is an incredible activity for you to have for remote learning. So why don't I do this? I'm going to present my screen, and we're going to get started and get you into the activity so you can see exactly what is going on. So here we go. All right. Whoops. So do me a favor. Everybody should see my screen. All right. And are we good? Does everybody, are you seeing it presented or are you seeing it still? Lisa, do you see it presented?
We see your slides on the left-hand side as well, but we can see your screen, so we're good. You can start.
Okay, all right. So it's presenting on my other screen. I'm trying to do this dual screen stuff. All right, so why don't we do this? We're just gonna get started with this. LabAids. I wanna talk to you a little bit about LabAids. It is a research-based program. It's they exclusively publish for science. They've got kits, and the printed material is both middle school and secondary. The CPUP, it's Science Education for the Public Understanding. It's based out of Lawrence Hall of Science at USC Berkeley. It's had National Science Foundation funding since 1987. And what I love about it, I've been teaching with LabAids materials for 17 years now, and it is totally issue-based, which makes it totally relevant to the kids. Based on research, it uses inquiry. They've got literacy and assessment embedded inside of it, and it's aligned to the next generation science standards. So, and our state standards. And they also have high school biology, and it's published by LabAids. All right, so let's do this. So the standards, they are formally assessed in this activity, developing a model to describe the cycling of matter and the flow of energy. And ecosystems are dynamic, functioning, and resilient. And the kids are going to develop models in this activity. So they go back to their food web, and they're looking at their owl pellets and their food webs that they made. And they're discussing. Now, I would have kids talking on my Google Meet. I'd have them in breakout rooms. Discussion is going to be an integral part of this. So I highly suggest you put that into place when you're doing this, because discourse is where things happen. So they start talking about what happens when we introduce a new species into a food web. So the student book, and you'll get this, so if you don't have it yet, Lisa's going to give it to you. It says, what happens when a new species is introduced into an ecosystem? Does it change the availability of food and therefore the matter and energy available to other organisms? Consider the zebra mussel. As you know by now, this species has been causing many problems in the United States since humans unintentionally introduced it into the 1980s. How can such a tiny organism, which averages around an inch long, cause such serious problems? To answer this question, we'll need to look at how a zebra mussel gets its food. Like all animals, zebra mussels acquire their food by eating other organisms. They feed by filtering microscopic plants and animals out of the water. A 1-inch zebra mussel can filter 1 liter of water a day. If you had a number of zebra mussels that totaled 1 kilogram of mass, they could filter 180 liters each day. That's equivalent to 45 kilograms or a 100-pound person filtering 8,100 liters per day. Imagine over 4,000 2-liter bottles. Zebra mussels are so efficient at filtering out food from the environment that other animals that feed the same way can't compete with them. So in this activity, you're going to model what happens to matter and energy when a new species is introduced into an ecosystem. So how does a new species affect the flow of energy and the cycling of matter through an ecosystem? So Lisa has dropped in the simulation. So what I would like you to do is you should have a simulation that should look just like this over in the chat. If you've got it, give me a thumbs up so I know.
I dropped the link into the chat, so it's a pretty simple one to type in, hopefully.
Carrie, do you see it in the, have you been able to open it? Great, great.
NSTA has set some security settings in here that they're not letting me change right now. So I haven't been able to hyperlink it, and I haven't been able to, let me see if I can hyperlink it this way. I haven't been able to drop files in, so I'm troubleshooting. Does this, no, that didn't hyperlink it either. I'm thinking if you can copy and paste.
Okay.
Oh, somebody get it that way? Yep, somebody dropped it in. Thank you.
Thanks. Great, Monica. So it says constructing your food web. So there is a remote student packet that Lisa will make sure you have. And it says, part A of your procedures. You're going to need to choose one of the 4 ecosystems on the simulation. So what I'd like you to do is click on it and you'll be able to, it will open up all of your 9 organisms. I just randomly picked one. So it says, as a group, so I would probably have kids working in a group of 2 or 3 in a small group in a breakout room. Choose at least 4 of the cards and construct a simple food chain. So if you hit the next button, it will allow you to create a simple food chain. So it says, identify whether it is a producer or a consumer, and record your food chain in the space provided in the remote learning packet. Were we able to drop that, Lisa?
Yep, the last link, Google Drive link, is the remote learning packet. I'm hoping that works.
Great.
And somebody just showed up, so I'm going to drop the sim link in the chat again.
Great. All right. So it says, identify the producers and consumers and show how energy flows and matter cycles through the ecosystem. So once you've built your simple food chain, you can take a screenshot of that and it will save in your photos in on your computer. Mine saves right on my desktop. So what you'll end up with is something that looks kind of like this. If you look on my screen. Are we good? I'm going to keep on going. All right. It says, now work with your group and create a food web using all of the cards. So you're going to have to hit next. So you're going to work with your group to create a food web using all of the cards in your set. Identify what happens to energy and matter for each interaction. Record your food web in your remote packet. So I can give you a tip. When you're dragging the little arrows, if you take that arrow and actually bring it over on top of the organism, it will stay. Otherwise, it kind of disappears. So I have my kids, yeah, they got a little frustrated. So I just said, okay, just make sure you're going on top of the organism.
I'm not able to move my arrow. Are you talking about the arrows that are?
All right, let me show you and I'll pull it back up so you can kind of see, because I've got one of them grabbed. Whoops. All right, can you see my basic one here? Oops, it's going to make me do this. Let me just drag them in. So the nice thing about the simulation is that it will not move forward until the kids have actually completed the first part of it. So let me do that. All right, now I got the next button. All right, so what I'm going to do is just drag these guys out.
Hey, Cindy, we can't see. It must be on your external screen. The screen you're sharing is still your PowerPoint.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share. Hold on 1 second. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Lisa.
No problem.
Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So you're going to just drag your organisms out. And then when you click, you've got to click on this little box down here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to, now it'll do my green arrows. So it will pull the green arrows over. And then when I want to look at energy, I'm going to click on that one and it will show me the energy flowing. Now, obviously I'm wrong here. I'm just clicking to show you. And then you can click on the next box. If you decide you don't want an arrow there, if you just hover over it, do you see where it goes red? You can click that arrow off of that actual activity or interaction. And so if you completely click off of it, you can also bring organisms off of the chart. It will allow you to drag them on and off of the simulation. One of the things I really like that was added to this is carbon dioxide and water into the environment. So the kids, we have a discussion about photosynthesis with this. All right, I'm going to. All right. So what they're doing now is their webs have to show biotic components and the interactions, and also that they're showing energy and matter and how it's cycling through the ecosystem. And really grateful that the sun is part of this. When the kids are doing this face to face, that's something we have to mention. Don't forget about the original source of energy. So what I'd like to do is I want to drop into the chat. I'm going to drop into the chat a whiteboard. I don't know if any of you use the whiteboard.fi. It is a free thing that you can drop into when you're online with the kids. And I love it because I'm able to, this is where we can be interactively, oops, I'm doing that to Carrie privately, sorry. There we go. So the whiteboard's dropped in. So when you're finished doing your food web, what I'd love you to do is to take that screenshot and you can add it into the whiteboard. There's a little picture icon when you go in and you get your own whiteboard. And you can add it into the whiteboard. So Gina, thank you. May, thank you. Liz, thank you. So the other thing that I really like about this activity right here is there is a rubric. Our kids get really familiar with using expectational rubrics. So the kids would have this rubric at the beginning and know, you know, how many of your kids go, is this right? Is this right? And I'm like, okay, just look at the rubric. And so they're able to look at this and be able to understand what their expectations are, that they're completely and accurately representing the components and relationships and mechanisms of the phenomenon, and this they will use and develop a complete and correct explanation. So at the end of this, they're going to have to do that. So they've got this in the beginning, just so you're aware of that. So May's got hers in, yay, thank you very much. So what we will do once the kids have completed this, and I'm going to share the whiteboard in just a second, is we would have a gallery walk where the kids would walk around and look at each other's food webs that they did. And the first part of this is to look at the food webs created by the groups of students that have the same food web and see what's similar and what is different. So I'm going to stop sharing my PowerPoint because I want to share my whiteboard. Yay. So great. So May put hers in there. So what's great is I can click on this and we can talk about May's food web and discuss the components that she put in. I love that the sun has got the blue line, the energy, so great job. I can close that. Now I'm going to show you Monica's web. Great job, Monica. And we can start discussing webs and components that they put in. Once we're finished doing that, what I'd love you to do is do a screenshot of yours, and it will allow you to go to the next part. And because we end in 15 minutes, I'd love you to, sorry, I feel like I'm like rushing you through. It's normally what we do teaching, right? Come on, come on, come on. We have 5 more minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna close hers, great. And now let me do this. I'm going to, oops, stop sharing that. And I'm going to share my PowerPoint again. All right. So what we'll do now is we will look at part B. So in part B, your teacher is going to give you a new species. It actually is added in the simulation to add to your food web. Identify what type of organism it is and the role in the ecosystem it plays. Use your model to explore how this new species affects the flow of energy and cycling of matter through your ecosystem. Record your revised food web in your remote learning packet. So the kids would add their new species into their new web. So this is where they will hover over and remove the arrow, and they can drag off any of the ones that no longer are able to survive in the ecosystem. So what I'd love you to do is once you've dragged the new one in, go back to your whiteboard and add your new one in. And that way we can look and see what's changed. Definitely Monica and May, because we've already looked at your original one. I'd love to see your second one.
Sorry, I messed up. Mine has the new species in it already.
That's okay. No, I want the new species. You're exactly doing what you're supposed to. So our kids are going to look at the whiteboard again with the new photo that you're going to add. And we're going to talk about that. Yes, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be. So the kids would be saving all of their screenshots in their remote learning packet. And I would just have, I use Google Classroom. So my kids would just submit their remote learning packet in through Google Classroom. So it would be able to be shared out via that and collected. So if you've got a new one and you want to add it into the whiteboard, that would be fabulous. And I'm going to open up the whiteboard so we can see. So the kids would, great. Thank you, Monica. So Monica, I love it. She even found the marker in there so we could start annotating. So she put in the wildflowers was the invasive species, correct? Great. And Monica, why don't you just share with us what happened when that when the wildflower was introduced into your ecosystem? What started to happen with some of your relationships?
So it was taking away carbon dioxide and water from the other ones. I think it was I'm looking at the tiny one. I think it was like oak and the grasses. And then there was more food available to the other primary consumers, but it was taking away resources from the other primary producers.
So what happened to the animals that needed to eat the grass?
So that's what I was interested. I very rarely see. I guess those animals weren't eating as much of the grass because they were also eating the wildflowers.
Got it. So some of our kids were like, well, they can't eat the wildflowers. They only eat grass. So then they're going to die.
Yeah.
I think it's always important. Thank you, Monica, to talk about that. My kids think that if an organism doesn't have something to eat, it dies. And I said, if you don't have anything to eat, do you lay down at the doorstep of McDonald's if they're closed and die? I'm like, no, we go somewhere else. And I'm like, right. So we talk about immigration, and what's happening to an ecosystem as a result of that. So what I'd love to do is, because we're kind of getting close to time right now, you have this simulation and you have the remote learning packet. I'd love to look at the analysis questions so that we could see exactly what we're looking at with assessments, because to me, this is where the activity actually comes home and starts to make a difference. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint, and that way you get to see that. So at this point, the analysis question that we're going to look at is going to be, so they have to explain how the introduction of their new species affected their ecosystem. And I am asking that they're specific about talking about matter and energy, what's happening to that inside of their ecosystem. And the next question, so there is another rubric that you could use for communicating concepts and ideas. But I really like the next one. And it says, what would happen if the top predators disappeared from your ecosystem? So what would happen if some organisms were overhunted? And what would happen if the producers disappeared? So we start looking at other things that might happen inside of an ecosystem. Diseases, wildfire. Oh my gosh, you guys from California, this is a perfect example of talking about natural disasters affecting ecosystems. And then they start looking back at their invasive species project that they're looking at and just starting to apply this to the organism that they started doing research with at the beginning of this unit. And how does that species impact the flow of energy and the cycling of matter? Now, a couple of you mentioned that we're really concerned about kids and sense making. How many of you use a driving question board? I'm finding that this is becoming huge with my kids, making sense of what's going on in a unit, where they're actually coming up with the questions that they feel like are driving their learning. And when their questions get answered, it's so funny. I had one girl the other day, she gets up, she's like, oh yeah, my question got answered. So they're excited about knowing that what they wondered in the beginning of the unit is starting to be answered as we're working through this. And then finally, we go back to the guiding question. So how does a new species affect the flow of energy and cycling of matter through an ecosystem? So at this point, what I'd love to do is just let you know that these are the earth science, the Earth's resources, geological processes, land and water human interactions, and solar system beyond, and weather and climate. I teach the life science ones. So biomedical engineering, body science, we just finished. Ecology, evolution, cells to organism, and reproduction. And then we have our chemistry units for middle school: chemistry of materials, chemical reactions, energy, force and motion, fields and interactions, and waves. One of the things I love about this kit, how many of you go to Walmart or dollar store and start creating units? And oh my gosh, if I clocked the amount of time that teachers take to create and gather resources, and with the remote learning, making little packets to send home, and oh my gosh, all this stuff. What I love is when I started teaching 7th grade and they gave me these kits, I felt like I died and went to science heaven, because everything is included in the kits. So they even have like little drawers that keep them all safe. Everything's color coded, and everything's in my kit. So I just pull out a drawer and I start to teach. The nice thing is that they are all driven by student notebooks, our kids' journal. They have literacy embedded. So I have writing frames. I have other literacy strategies that are embedded inside of the curriculum and the readings. All the rubrics are included in this. And what I really like right now is, since we're remote, there's online portals. So everything of mine is online. I also have PowerPoints. I didn't make this PowerPoint. I'd love to tell you I did, but I didn't. They have Spanish text and Spanish sheets for me, which is huge because Myrtle Beach has a huge Spanish population. Oops, I'm going to try to do this because this is super important for you to see. Let me see if I can just click on this. Oops. So they have lab sent videos. So when a kid is absent, what do? They don't, right? And so my kids, that's the paramecium one. So we can use these videos for remote learning, which I'm thoroughly loving, but also when I'm face-to-face, if a kid misses a lab, he still has his lab sent to do. So I can post that in Google Classroom and assign it. And I'm really kind of excited about all their remote learning packets and their simulations that they've now embedded into the curriculum. And so today you were able to experience the simulation for the modeling the introduction of a new species. And so they're also putting together hands-on home packets that we can mail to our kids, or I have our kids, they come and pick them up. So they have them. And I get training for all my units, which is really cool. You have a great little activity that you can use. I'm gonna stop sharing. And if we have any questions, I think that's what I'd prefer to spend time on after you're done with your ending poll. Okay. So you should have a poll that posted. Great. Carrie, thank you. I think it's really cool. Feel very fortunate to be able to have this, and little did we know how much we'd need it. That's for sure. Yes, I am, Lisa. And I want to thank you all for turning on your cameras. How nice is that to be able to see faces? So thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
We have a question in the chat, Cindy, from Elizabeth. Does the simulation only allow correct answers? Does it tell you if you make a wrong choice?
So no, it doesn't. You're allowed to make mistakes. So in the very beginning, I just dragged out things and I made an animal a producer. And so you're able to see misconceptions. Thanks, Elizabeth. That's a great question. You're able to see misconceptions on their documents. And that's why I love that free whiteboard, is because I get to see them right away. I don't want to grade a sheet later and go, wow, you totally missed the boat. I want to be able to pull that whiteboard up and go, all right, let's look at this one. Great ideas, but tell me this, is a chipmunk a producer? Like, so we're able to have that discourse as we're going. So that's why I think a whiteboard or some type of place that kids, and you don't have to share this out, you know, you can click on it and share it. I also really like Nearpod. There's a couple of different applications that you can use where kids can post their work, and you can, May loves Nearpod too, that you can present it to your kids. So that's what I think is great about having some type of discourse with this, where kids are processing. And what I also love is that kids will come up with things that don't fit into my box, that they go, I'm thinking, wow, I never thought of it that way. So it's a great way to even have discussions. So the kids come back in and they start looking at a food web that's just like theirs and going, wow, I didn't see that. Wow, right. Energy is only coming, it's only coming from the sun. After that, it's energy and matter. So the kids start being able to not only learn from me, but each other. So thank you. I think that was a really long answer to a short question.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think we're good. There's none in the chat.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all for coming. It's been fun. It's my first virtual. There's something about not being face-to-face that I definitely miss. But it's been kind of fun. It's nice to be at home and have your own coffee, right? So
True.
thank you very much for attending. Monica,
Thank you,
thanks for sharing.